The cave paintings exist. We've known about them for over a century. We've photographed them, dated them, built museums around them, put them in every history textbook written in the last 100 years. The story is settled. Early humans were nomads. They followed herds and seasons. They had no attachment to any place. Every campfire was temporary. Every shelter borrowed. The caves were used because they were there. The paintings were records of the hunt, markings for the tribe, maybe decoration. The story is clean. It makes sense. It has been wrong the entire time. The paintings aren't on every wall. Most of the rock is completely bare. In caves that stretch for hundreds of meters, the art clusters in specific chambers, specific corners, specific ceilings. And those clusters appear in different caves, made by different groups of people, separated by thousands of years and hundreds of miles. Someone chose exactly where to put them. Chauvet Cave in France was first used 36,000 years ago, before your species had a name for itself, before the first word for time was ever spoken. Then a rockfall sealed it. Then 10,000 years later, a different group of humans entered, found what was already there, and added to it. They didn't paint over the older images. They painted around them. They continued them. Two groups with no shared language, no shared memory, no possible contact with each other, returning to the same walls, in the same deep chambers, picking up where something had been left. That is not shelter behavior. Shelter is the entrance, the dry ledge near the opening where fireworks and escape is possible. You can feel the outside air from there. You can hear what's moving in the dark. The art is never there. It's always somewhere else, deeper, harder to reach, requiring torches, requiring crawling, requiring 40 minutes of commitment to go further in than survival ever asked anyone to go. Lascaux Cave has a chamber called the Shaft. It sits at the lowest, deepest point in the entire system. To reach it, you have to descend a vertical rock face in the dark, holding a torch, with no way to see the bottom. That chamber holds the only complete scene in all of Lascaux: a man falling before a bison. It is the only painting of a human being in the entire cave. Every other image is animal. The most important image, the hardest to reach. That isn't a coincidence. That is a choice made by someone who knew exactly what they were doing, 10,000 years before writing existed. The explanation that took over most of the 20th century was shamanism. The caves were ceremonial spaces. The paintings were visions. In 1988, a South African archaeologist named David Lewis Williams published The Neuropsychological Model: the human brain under extreme sensory stress, deep darkness, oxygen deprivation, the specific disorientation of underground silence produces predictable hallucinations, grids, spirals, large animals moving. And the paintings match those patterns exactly. Different cultures, no contact, same images, same brain, same pressure, same visions. It felt complete. It spread through academic papers, then museums, then documentaries. It explained the isolation, the animal forms, the consistency across cultures. It even explained why people kept returning. Each visit a ritual, a controlled descent into vision. But it had one problem it could never answer. Sensory deprivation happens anywhere in the deep cave. If the paintings were visions produced by darkness and pressure, they should appear throughout, on any wall, in any passage. Where they don't. They cluster. They concentrate, kilometer after kilometer of bare rock, and then in one specific chamber, 100 images on every surface. Something was different about those specific spots, something the body could detect, something that had nothing to do with how long you'd been underground. In the late 1980s, a researcher named Igor Reznikov from the University of Paris walked into Chauvet Cave alone. No survey equipment, no instruments, just his voice. Reznikov hummed. He moved slowly through every passage, humming at different pitches, stopping, listening to what the cave did with the sound, where the rock amplified, where it scattered, where the hum detached from him and came back from somewhere else, from inside the wall itself, arriving a half-second after he'd stopped. He mapped every acoustic anomaly, every echo chamber, every spot where the sound did something the body registered as wrong, as alive, as other. Then he laid the acoustic map next to the art map. They were the same map. 8 out of every 10 cave paintings across Chauvet, Lascaux, and every major site Reznikov surveyed sit at precisely the acoustic high points. The chambers where sound echoes in ways the body can't immediately explain, where a voice seems to come from inside the rock, where two sound waves meet and cancel each other out and produce a vibrating silence that sits in the chest and doesn't leave, where, in total darkness, with a torch hissing behind you, you stop moving and hear yourself, coming back from somewhere you cannot see. They didn't have a word for echo. They had no model of how sound reflects off curved stone. What they had was the experience, sudden, physical, impossible to dismiss, of the rock responding, of the wall breathing back. And the body, in that moment, made the only interpretation available to it. This place is alive. Something lives here. And when I spoke, it answered. They marked those spots. Not once, not one culture, one era. Every group, across 50,000 years, a span of time so long that the entire recorded history of human civilization would fit inside it 25 times. Different languages, different tools, different animals on the walls, the same acoustic chambers, the same specific corners where the rock gave the sound back. The choosing was never random. It was precise. At several sites, the art doesn't just cluster near echo chambers. It sits at the acoustic nodes, the exact geometric points where two sound waves cancel each other out completely. Not echo, not amplification, something stranger, a standing resonance, a vibration with no apparent source, felt in the sternum before it's heard. These points can only be found one way, by walking the cave in silence, humming, and waiting for the moment your body tells you something has changed. Someone did that, in the dark, with fire, before anything was painted. They surveyed the cave acoustically before they ever picked up pigment. In 1879, a Spanish nobleman named Marcelino Sanz de Sautula was excavating the floor of Altamira Cave for flint tools. He was focused on the ground. That's where the archaeology was. That's what the science expected. His 8-year-old daughter, Maria, had come with him that day. She wandered into the low side chamber, the one adults had to crouch to enter, the one that would have seemed to any trained researcher too small, too uncomfortable, too marginal to matter. She looked up at, "Look, Papa, bulls." Sautola published the discovery. The scientific establishment rejected it immediately. The paintings were too sophisticated, too advanced. A forgery, they said, or a delusion. He spent the remaining years of his life defending them. He died in 1888, disgraced. The accusations of fraud still attached to his name. 14 years after his death, they confirmed it. Altamira was real. The ceiling was genuine. The oldest large-scale paintings in the world. The first modern person to see them clearly, to walk into that chamber without the weight of assumption, was the only one small enough to enter without thinking about whether she was supposed to. She looked up because there was nothing else to look at, and the cave had been waiting in that specific, low-ceilinged resonant room for exactly that. The paintings aren't everywhere. That was the crack at the beginning of this. Someone chose exactly where to put them. Now you know what the choosing was. Not decoration, not record-keeping, not vision. Acoustic cartography. The mapping of places where the earth answered human sound in ways the body could not ignore. And when they found those places, they returned to them across 10,000 years, across the entire span of what we call prehistory. Groups with no contact, no common language, no shared memory, pulled back to the same chambers because the chambers did something to the people inside them. Something the body still does. Tonight, when the room goes quiet, when the television cuts off or the music stops and there's a moment of actual silence, notice what happens in your chest. That slight alertness, that involuntary scan, the body tipping its weight forward just slightly, listening for whether the silence will answer. That response is older than language, older than fire. It was running in the people who descended into Chauvet with nothing but torches and their own voices 36,000 years ago, before your species had a word for what they were doing. They kept going back because the caves spoke. The body already knew to listen.